I'm a messy worker, and especially during these phases of exploration, like I want to go wide. So I follow the flow and do an iteration, duplicate, tweak, duplicate, tweak.
So when you started to redesign it, what was the main problem you're trying to solve or pain points?
UI3 is about opening up as much of the canvas as possible. Like canvas being the area where your work lives.
I'm curious to see, what was your first iteration?
This was my first suggestion, and then from there it kept evolving. So this goes over a couple of different states, hover, split hover states and everything. Kept pushing it. What if the sub actions live in a little sub menu? Here, I think this is an interesting one. It didn't make the cut. So many different explorations.
Howdy and welcome to Deep Dive. This is your host, Jay. Today, we have Tim Van Damme. Some of you might know him as Max Voltar from Twitter. He's going to be showing us behind the scenes of how he designed the new toolbar in Figma UI3, which is internally codenamed Tool Belt.
Thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Yeah. I'm just like literally my eyes are going all over your Figma file, trying to just see what's going on there. Quick question. Why call it the tool belt? Was there a reason for calling it tool belt and not just the toolbar?
I joined Figma a little over 9 months ago, and at that point UI3 was already in full swing. So UI3 was actually started by Ryan Hassan maybe 2.5 years ago. Like it's been in the works for a while. And they had already named it the tool belt. For me personally, I like that name because at my previous job at Abstract, we had a similar belt and we called it the Bat Belt. So yes, calling it a belt makes sense.
Love it. Wow. We got a lot of stuff going on here. I see a lot of comments.
Yeah, this is probably like half of the explorations that we've done. There are bits that came before this, there are bits that came after this, but this was like when we really got into it. As you can tell, my files are absolutely pristine. Clinical, even, you might say. No, I'm a messy worker. And especially during these phases of exploration, like I want to go wide. So I follow the flow and do an iteration, duplicate, tweak, stuff like that. But also, it isn't just me in the file. As you can see, there are a lot of comments in here. But we can dive in a bit more later. There are also explorations done by other people. And that someone might do an exploration that kind of kicks off an entire new branch of explorations. And like, it will inspire me, it will inspire someone else. And it's just none of the projects that I'm going to show you today are 100% me. Like it is myself plus this team of insanely talented and driven designers. And we all not push each other, but inspire each other to do more, explore more. And yeah, we keep each other on our toes, but it's a really fun vibe.
So one quick question there. Whenever someone wants to do a different exploration than what you got going on, how do they do it? Do they just paste their explorations in the same page that you're working on? Do they copy your file? How do they go about doing that?
Because this is like a scratch file, like people just do it on the page, like probably like right next to where I've done something. And then they'll either annotate it or leave some comments.
Example?
Yeah, let me see. Oh, this is a good one. Here's Jacob coming in, doing a riff 1 and riff 2. It's close to what I did. Me annotating my own stuff so people who come in have an idea of what's going on.
Can you expand one of the annotations? I'm curious to see what you were annotating.
Oh, this is just the different explorations. Like sometimes, especially for the tool belt, like you go so deep, and if you zoom out, it's what is different between option 7 and 9, for example, because it's the details. It's like a single pixel or a single shade of gray that changed or something, and might be hard to spot. What I love doing is making sure that my files make sense to me, obviously, but also my files make sense to anyone who opens it. Like, how can they get a grasp of what's happening within a couple of seconds? That way, it's easier for them to provide feedback, obviously. But let's say next year we want to redo this and a different designer is assigned to the project. Like, how can they build up context as quickly as possible? and pick up the work, like armed with all the context, all of the explorations that I've gone through, so they don't have to repeat the mistakes that I made or like the dead ends that I hit.
Can you explain one of the annotations? Because I see like exploration 7 or exploration 8, hover. So I think what you're trying to explain is you have the exploration name and then you're trying to give some brief idea. Is it a hover state that's different?
Yeah, actually, this isn't properly annotated. This is literally what I just said not to do. But yeah, these are different states, actually. Is there a better example? Let me see. On here, maybe. All right, not on here. My mistake. I thought
That's fine.
I wasn't reading my own things.
How long was this project? So roughly, like this tool build project? A couple of months, maybe more than that?
I was working on a couple of different things at the same time. This definitely took a couple of weeks of like pretty intense explorations. That was probably, I don't know, December or something. But then obviously, you know, as a team, you agree on like, all right, this is the direction we want to take with the tool belt. But then other things keep changing. The dev mode toggle had to switch position so that, and that like, in these explorations, dev mode toggle was part of the tool belt. Then we took it out later. I don't even think that's in here. And then later we brought it back. But the universe around this tool belt keeps evolving as well. So this tool belt was being worked on up until a week before config or 2 weeks before config.
Wow. When you first started working on the project, like the state 0 or the ground 0, right? What was the problem you're trying to solve? Because some people could say that, hey, whatever, like the UI2 or the old Figma toolbar was working perfectly fine. So when you started to redesign it, what was the main problem you're trying to solve or pain points?
UI3 is about opening up as much of the canvas as possible. Like the canvas being the area where your work lives. Everything around it is the Chrome, we call it. With UI2, you had this solid bar across the top. I think it was like 48 pixels tall or maybe even taller, which isn't that much, but it's like the feeling you get, like it blocks off an entire strip. And our screens are all landscape oriented, most of them at least. Some people rotate them 90 degrees, but that's a very small percentage. Vertical screen estate is more like needed. That's the reason that we took that bar away. That bar housed 4 main things that we had to relocate. So it housed like left to right, it had the tools. Then you had selection actions. So depending on...
Do you have a before and after by any chance? The only reason I'm asking is because I'm guessing somewhere you might have had a before and after. So if you were having that zoomed in while we talk about it, it would just hit home run.
Here we go. I can show it like this. So I just toggled back to the previous one. In UI2, you had the Figma menu, you had your tools, and then if you select something, the selection actions become available. But you also have the file and where it lives, and then a bunch of sharing and other actions here. Now let me switch to the new UI. And as you can see, the tools live at the bottom in the new tool belt that we've been talking about. If you select something, the selection actions, they live here near the item information, the selected item information. There's a little overflow menu here. The share and the other bits live in the top right of the right sidebar, and then the file information now prominently lives in the top left.
I can see in this new UI, like there's a lot of space that's freed up at the top, like you were mentioning. The canvas is freed up now.
Yep. That was the goal. I hope we succeeded there. Obviously, the tool belt still takes up a bit of space at the bottom, but it doesn't go full width. It is offset from the bottom there. That kind of makes it more airy as well. There's space around it, giving you the impression that you still have the full height available.
I'm curious to see, what was your first iteration? This is the final design we're seeing, but like when you started working on all these iterations, I'm curious to see what was that first iteration and what was your thinking there? Or one of the earlier iterations?
The top one here, change this, there we go. This was what was in there when I joined. This was designed by Ryan, and it was beautiful. But we looked at it, and some of the bits here aren't fully UI3. So at this stage, like the styling of the sidebars, that was like advanced, and we were convinced that we wanted to go with that. And we felt like this didn't fully match. So you still had the kind of little animating chevron that we had in UI2. The rounded corners both didn't match the sidebars, but they also, if you round corners on one end of a button, like it makes it really hard to center an icon inside of it, especially an icon that's rotated 45 degrees. So this was, the top one is what was there. And then this was my first suggestion. And then from there, it's kind of like, it kept evolving. So this goes over a couple of different states, split hover states and everything. Then what else? Kept pushing it. What if the sub actions live in a little sub menu here? I think this is an interesting one. It didn't make the cut because it made the width of the tool belt hard to predict. And what if, I don't know, we had 20 options? Like 20 options are fine to live in a menu, but they might not, like it might not work fully expand. And then just start looking also at, okay, what does it look like in dev mode? That's an important one too. Like the range of tools that you have available changes when you go over to dev mode, but we want it to be as consistent as possible. Currently, you have dev mode toggle. We played with other toggles as well. What else? Brought some more color. Like, what if FigJam used the same one as well? It's like stress testing the design system of the tool belt. We played with these vertical versions, which I still really like. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll convince someone to build this or allow you to drag it around. So many different explorations. What if instead of a little chevron, there's like this semicircle that kind of indicates, oh, you can, I don't know, maybe long click it, right click it to open the menu. In the end, chevron was a way better idea. It's just a lot more clear. This one was interesting too. So this is basic, it's broken. But basically, what if the selection actions lived close to the tool belt, which that was too much as well.
Width-wise, like it's increasing the width of it, the tool belt, like having the selection action. I see the done escape living right.
Yeah, it would more look something more like this. Basically, like it would introduce a second layer on top, and it's just a lot. And then as you move through your file, you select different things. The amount of actions available to you also changes. So that thing was constantly going like wide, short, wide, narrow, wide, narrow, wide, narrow, and it was a jarring experience.
And then every time you decided, yeah, this is the reason why we're not going to go with this iteration, were you documenting those decisions in the comments? Because I see for a lot of iterations, you have comments there. So I'm just curious to see how are you leveraging the comments?
Stuff like this is just like annotations for people new to the file. Oh, I currently like these two most if people come in. But you also see a lot of comments from people, like they'll note things that they love, things that they don't love. Have a conversation around it, and all of that input is then taken into the next round of explorations. Obviously, this is the mess. This is where most of the work happened. Every couple of days or weeks, we would also have more structured reviews, critiques, where it's more about getting sign off or getting a signal of how close to sign off are we. Like, are we going into the right direction? Are we getting closer to something that we can basically mark as done and allows us to move forward to the next part.
Was it difficult because you can't just have a research with a designer? Because if you tell like a designer that, hey, we're building UI3, this is what it looks like, they might have a strong take. So how did you do research? Is it just internal designers at Figma?
It evolved over time. Obviously, for a long time, we couldn't talk about it. We wanted it to be a big surprise, which it was going to be anyway, because it's like a full redesign. But we wanted to keep it under wraps. Everyone in the design team was invited to leave feedback. At a certain point, we did start inviting external people for a research. And we had the typical research session. We had a short script of things, but it was mostly about letting them click around, letting them experience the new UI with their files, That was a very important aspect. So we would get on a call with them, and then we would enable the new UI just for them, for that call. Because every design file is structured in a different way depending on how you work as a designer, how you work as the design team, how you work as a company. Dropping you into a file that has content that you're not familiar with in a structure that you're not familiar with doesn't give you the best feedback, obviously. It was important to do it with their own content. Through these sessions, obviously, we got a lot of feedback. We got a lot of really positive feedback as well, which was great. But we definitely kept an eye out for the patterns that we saw. Oh, people kept mentioning something specific. Let's look into it. Let's see how we can improve it. All those decisions were still made in a very opinionated way as well. Like we had a vision for this. We don't want to force that vision through, but we want to have an opinion. If UI3 is out now and there's a ton of feedback, you can't listen to every bit of feedback. Again, look for the themes, act on those, and serve like the masses there. But design is extremely subjective. If we're working a team of 3 or 4 designers mostly on this project, and our combined tastes shine through in what UI3 is today, a different set of designers, or even swap out one person on the team, and it might have looked completely different. That's fine. Like that is like design will always be subjective. It is about finding the objectivity, like finding objectively what works, what doesn't. If it doesn't work, act on it. And that's something that we'll keep doing. Like as more people are using UI3, we get more data and we see more patterns, and we'll keep working on those. We'll never be too proud to say, oh, we're not going to change that.
Is there like an iteration that in this entire page that comes to mind where after doing research internally and externally, you identified a couple of patterns and you said, okay, let me try to address those things?
This is when we start looking at, again, like stress testing the new tool built across our different apps. FigJam never ended up using this, but still, like, it allowed us to push the system and see, like, how far does it stretch and when does it break? And this is something I wanted to do. Like, you don't always have to do it, and these things might never happen, but it is good to know that a design isn't fully like a one-off. Like, a design is a system. It is a collection of building blocks, of components, of things that you can turn on or off, where you can add new things. This also allows you in the future, like if you need to add things, there's more existing work that you can use as a starting point. Like the style or the vibe has been set, and there's more material for you to base the work on.
Makes sense. I think something I'm curious to know is because when you have a lot of experience working on design tools in general, so of course you have an opinion on something. So when I look at one of those comments, and if you were to just pick one of those comments where someone is giving you feedback and me expand that comment, are you expected to reply? Do you reply to every single comment saying that thank you for the feedback, I'll think about it? Or is the expectation that this comment is there for you to consider, but you may choose not to implement that feedback?
I'll always respond. Like, if people make time in their day to give feedback on my work, I want to respect that effort. Like, we all have very busy schedules. So someone putting in the effort, I'll always reply and at least try to turn it into a conversation.
Can you show an example in one of the comments, whichever one you want to expand? And I see. So you're still like replying to, you're not just.
I think this is a good one. Like, Lewis asked a question about something, and there are different types of feedback that you can get, right? It's either people don't like it, and then it's my goal to understand why don't they like it. People don't understand something. It could just be like positive. Like, yeah, good work. That's great too. But it's always important to get to the bottom of what encouraged someone to say this specific thing, right? Giving feedback it's a skill, and some people are really good at, and other people's aren't yet, which is totally fine. And then I feel like it's my job to help them explain why they reacted in a certain way to something. So open up the conversation, or like in this case, encouraging them to do their own explorations, which they then did underneath the comment bubble here. And then I think we actually hopped on a Zoom call after this and talked more about it.
That's rare. Like you're not feeling any kind of like territorial. You're not telling Luis that, hey, this is my territory. Like you're just like, hey, have a go at it. I think that's a little bit rare. Like you're just like, hey, if you have a better exploration, take my file and go run with it.
I'm an experienced designer. I'm experienced enough to know that I don't know everything. I thrive in an environment where the design is done by like with a team, not in a solo. Put me in a solo, I go crazy. I need people to give me feedback, people to push back, people to riff with, riffing, jamming, whatever. It's the most fun thing there is. I don't have an example here, but sometimes we have these amazing sessions where it's just like multiple people duplicating things live. It's like boom, 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 one after the other. And it's crazy. And like, oh, and this idea, oh, and this idea, yeah, and this, and then it's a vibe. It's a party. Like that is like the best design. I love design that feels like that. Design that feels collaborative. Again, I did not design any of this by myself. Nothing I've done in my career has been designed just by myself. It is with the team around me, pushing each other, having fun, being respectful towards each other.
So this is the playground or sandbox where you have so many iterations, and as you zoom out, you can see there's so many iterations here. So once you landed on maybe a final direction, did you end up like creating a separate page, or everything is just on this page itself?
In this case, once we landed somewhere, I put it into our main UI3 library where all of the components live. So we had a tool build component there. I updated that to match the styling that we settled on. And that way, when people update their files, they get the new tool build in there. Yeah, if for large swings like this, like we'll work in a different file. For smaller tweaks, we'll just create a new branch for the library file and do some explorations there and then merge it back in. It depends on how large of a dance floor do we need to do what we want to do.
Before we wrap up, is there like any iteration that maybe you discarded that you really liked? And if you could cover like why it was discarded and your thought process behind it.
Yeah. I think this is the interesting thing. If you do feedback, all feedback makes sense. It makes sense to act on it, which makes it that you don't have regrets in the end. Because the end product, like the end result, makes sense and it is solid. It is based on not just like your opinion or like your vantage point of things, but that of a collection of people. So it is very solid. And then that's enough for me. That makes me really like it. I like to add a lot of things to my design initially, a lot of details, a lot of buttons, a lot of everything, and then go through the process of removing things until it collapses again, right? But sometimes, because I added those things, it's harder for me to stay objective when the time comes to start removing things. And that's when people coming in and giving feedback really helps. Oh, I don't need that divider there. Like I added 8 dividers. We only need 2 or something, and let the white space do the work there instead, that kind of stuff. See a good example. I think there's a good example at the comments. So I'm like, this is a crazy idea. What if every button had an outline by default, and then you start hovering, and then we're obviously this is crazy. Like this is visually very taxing to the UI. It's very busy. But I did like it at that point. I don't like it anymore, but I really like seeing it again. I'm like, yeah, that was like, I understand why I did that expiration, and I also understand why we moved away from it. Yeah. And there are other stuff, like, for example, this toggle is like very intense, and the intense one. Where did we really go crazy? Yeah, stuff like this.
Oh yeah, what is that?
It's a toggle. It's fun to explore. It's almost fun to put down in the file as a, let's not do this, but let's keep it as a reminder that this is not something we should do. So Yeah, what I like about this page, we started top left and we ended at bottom right somewhere. Like it really flowed and it evolved and took a step back, 2 steps forward, that kind of stuff. I love these artifacts, these pages. They tell a story.
This is amazing, man. I love this. Hey folks, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watch this video. Let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the future, and I will see you in the next deep dive.